Let's talk about my top 10 one and done eyeshadows. I'm extra excited for this video because it is a collaboration with Nupur and Smita here on YouTube as well as Instagram. I will link their videos as well as their Instagrams down in the description box. You definitely want to check them out. If you love indie makeup content, single eyeshadow content, in-depth reviews and tutorials, you're definitely going to want to check them out. So each of us is going to talk about our top 10 one and done eyeshadows, and these are going to be a variety of some mainstream, some indie, some single shadows, any form of eyeshadow. So you're about to get 30 recommendations between the three of us. Some of these eyeshadows I purchased myself and some of them were sent to Made PR, and I will mark them accordingly in the description box. I did a spicy neutral single eyeshadow video recently, which I will link in the description box, and all of those shadows definitely apply to being really amazing one and done shadows. And I didn't want to cross any of those over into this video. I wanted these to be fresh pick. There is one repeat from that video, but the rest of them are all different, and I wanted to show you a spectrum of options. So some that are more topper-like, some that are a little bit more opaque, some of them might be a little bit more dimensional, some are shifty, some are not. And I was really focused especially on the tones of these. So I wanted to show you some warmer options as well as some cooler tone options and just everything in between. Of course, they all have their own unique formula. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start off with the shade that I'm wearing on the eyes right now, and this is Komodo from Glaminatrix Cosmetics. I recently did a reel where I compared this one to Lithium and Diamond Dog from Urban Decay, and this is such a beautiful single shadow. Really, any of these in the Glimmering Creatures lines as well as the Celebration bundles, they're all beautiful. This is a beautiful cooler tone brown. It's very, very smooth. It's very opaque upon one swipe. I don't think you'll be really able to share this one out, but I don't think it's meant to be shared out. It's definitely meant to be more of a typical neutral, fully opaque metallic shadow. It's metallic in a little bit of a sparkly way, so there is definitely a little bit of sparkle, but the particle size of this shadow is not sparkly, if that makes sense. So it's a uniform smoothness across the pigment, which compared to Lithium or Diamond Dog, those have basically like a base pigment and then a slightly larger particle size of sparkles on top. Generally speaking, the Moondish shadows are that way. And it does have a little bit of dimensionality, being a more metallic type of shadow, where depending on the way light hits it, you will see a little bit more brightness. So as I'm sitting this way, I can see the brightness really focused in the kind of center of my lid going inwards. And then on the outer corners, I see just a little bit more of that cooler tone brown, which for me is a staple feature for a perfect one and done shadow. It does also look essentially wet on the lid. And I forgot to mention these are in no particular order. The next shade I'm going to talk about is Haze of the Moon from Terra Moons. Now this was originally launched as a highlighter, but I did repan mine into a 26mm pan, and they do sell it in a 26mm pan, and this is the only repeat for my spicy neutral single eyeshadows. So this one is a little bit minky as well. It's definitely got a cooler tone to it, and it has blue sparkles throughout it. It is such a beauty. It's very, very smooth. I would say texture-wise, it's very similar in the way the Glaminatrix is, where it is a uniform smoothness all the way across. And because of the blue flecks throughout it, it does have a little bit of a shift. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a fully multi-chrome eyeshadow. It is definitely more of a duochrome, and it does shift to a purple. It just has so much going on for it. So this one just looks amazing all over the lid. Very, very dimensional kind of shade. The next shade I'm going to talk about is Saffron from Clionadh Cosmetics, and this is their Deep Iridescent Multi-Chrome. I love their Deep Iridescent multi-chromes. They do at this point have, I think, about 15 of them, and they have all different variations of tones and shifts, and this one is so punchy. This is definitely more of a statement type of one and done shadow. It's very glowy. It's so smooth. If you went in with the tiniest bit and you didn't use a tacky primer, you could definitely apply more of a sheer type of wash with it, and this one has essentially no base to it. It's not quite an iridescent multi-chrome. It has more punchiness and more color to it. This one is a stunning bright pink to gold, and this is such a flattering shadow. Not only does it have the shine, but it has the smoothness, and you will not experience any sort of skin texture accentuation. So this shade doesn't necessarily have any sparkle. It has a very uniform type of shine, but it's not quite super metallic. It's kind of like an in-between, like a amped up satin, if you will, but the glowiness is really what makes it look extra shiny. This is definitely a go-to shade, and the other one I love from this line from Clionadh is Vermilion as an honorable mention. As I almost almost included that one, so it was kind of between those two. So the next shade is from Moira Cosmetics, and it is one of their Chroma Light shadows. It is the shade 19 Keepsake. This is a different take on the green, blue, brown type of shadow, which I do have one to show you like that. This is almost baseless. It's pretty sheer. It does have just a tad bit of a base, and this one basically flashes like greenish gold and has a soft shift to blue. This is an amazing sheer wash eyeshadow. This one is a little bit harder pressed. It's almost hard panning just a little bit. It applies really nicely with a brush, and it is pretty piecey. It is definitely more sparkly rather than metallic. I would recommend a tacky primer with this one, especially if you have hooded and or oily lids, but this is such a beautiful shadow, and I believe this is only about $5 or $6, and they do run sales here and there. I would call this one a duochrome. It just looks so dimensional all over the lid, and this one is also really fun to layer over different tones of mattes. Next shade is Oden, and this one is from Beauty Creations, and this is a $5 eyeshadow, and I think this is just as good as the Urban Decay Muda shadow in the shade Solstice. I believe it's Solstice. I wore this one in my dedicated video on these Beauty Creations single shadows. I do have almost all of them, and these are just, I can't believe how affordable these are. It's so underrated. Very, very uniformly smooth all the way across. Not necessarily sparkly, but very wet looking because of the shine, and especially because of the base in it. And it does flash green straight on, but it does have a shift to like a magenta purple. It has like a little bit of both going on, and this one is a little bit harder pressed in the pan, but it applies beautifully. It feels silky smooth. There's definitely not going to be any sort of skin texture accentuation. This one you could definitely sheer out a little bit, but you could also build it up, which is another feature I look for in a one and done shadow. Not always, but it's definitely a huge bonus when you do have that option of layerability. The next shade is a staple. I've had this shadow since it launched. It was such a cult favorite, and this is Toucana from Devinah Cosmetics. I've mentioned it in so many videos. It's a beautiful sheer shadow. Again, you have the buildability of this one. This one has a baby pink flash straight on with a shift to kind of like an orangey gold. It looks so beautiful all over the lid. And of course, this one has a beautiful Devinah formula and particle size. So this one I would say is a little bit more on the sparkly side. It's not necessarily like a smooth, opaque, metallic, for example, like the Glaminatrix or the Terra Moons shade. This one is for sure a little bit more piecey, a little bit more sparkly, but not in a way where the sparkles kind of just sit on top. I do like to wear this one with a tacky primer underneath, but if you wanted more of a wash and you don't really have problems with fallout, then you could definitely just tap it all over the lid and get a super light, beautiful, sparkly pink wash. So I knew I wanted a Colourpop Super Shock shadow in here, and I have quite a few of them, and I feel like the expected recommendation is Ritz or Frog, but based on the assortment of different shades that I'm talking about, I decided to talk about Ladybird. This one is a very soft champagne, extra sparkly, extra topper-like. Definitely would recommend a tacky primer if you are prone to experiencing fallout throughout the day, just to really help these stick down and wear better, because I do tend to get fallout with these more sparkly shades from the Super Shocks because they do have a variety of different levels of how shiny and opaque they are, and this one is definitely very topper-like, but you could also build this one up a bit on your lid and it will just give you that beautiful wet look. It's a soft shade that packs a punch. There is no way I could have done this video without mentioning Ice Blink from the collaboration between ShineBySD and Seeking Shifts, aka Riley. This is such a staple shadow. I did receive this one in PR, but I bought a backup of this one because there's no way I can do without the shade. It is the most ethereal PC sparkle. You can't really build this one up there because there is really nothing to build it up to because it is so sparkly. The texture of this one feels really smooth, and while it's a topper shadow, it's very dimensional. It has bright red and blue flecks throughout it, as well as white flecks, which is what makes it so icy. And this one is just so fun to top over any other shadows or to wear on its own. I mean, this one is going to really sparkle in pretty much any lighting, but especially any direct lighting like direct sunlight and also overhead lights. Extremely transformative. You can also layer this one over mattes and get a totally different type of vibe, which is something I love so much about it. And I just feel like the texture of this one is exquisite, just so beautiful, very smooth, will not accentuate any sort of skin texture. And people will be asking you, what are you wearing? Moving on to the last two shades, I knew I had to talk about this Joocyee shadow. It is the D114. I do have a lot of these. I don't think I have all of the shades they have, but I did do a dedicated video on this one. There's something about this shade. It looks like it would be a little bit more opaque in the pan, but it's actually quite sheer. But it does have also at the same time a base to it, but I feel like it's pretty buildable. It's definitely very, very, very sparkly. It's more of on the PC side, and it is a little bit harder pressed, but it does pick up fine. I definitely see a little bit of hard panning going on though, but I really don't mind it. It's still usable. I can also just use a brush if it really came to that. It has a really pale plum base with greenish blue sparkles throughout. It is such an ultra dimensional shade. It is absolutely mesmerizing on the lids, and it is so unique to my collection. I don't have anything like this. The base and the way that the sparkles are on top of it, it's a very interesting one and done shade. I would recommend a tacky primer with this one because you might get some fallout with this one because, again, the sparkles are kind of sitting on top. I think this one is best when you press it into the lid. And the last shade is actually an eyeshadow stick, and this is from KVD Beaute. This is the Dazzle Stick in the shade Hail Surge 10. They do have like 5 other shades, and they have actually a bunch of neutral shades, but this one for me is just a standout. Stunning formula. It does not crease on me. Once it sets, it will not move. This is a champagne shade that leans peachy for sure, and it has so much dimensionality to it. It does feel a little bit cooling on the lid when you first put it on, but that does go away, especially as it sets down. But this one, you definitely want to work a little bit faster with it. I would recommend using a brush or a finger to apply it because it is a little bit tricky. It is a little bit soft. If you swipe it on, you might get an uneven application, and it might apply a little bit more product in one section than the other, and then you have to kind of work really fast to smooth it out. So I would recommend going in with your finger on top of it and then tapping it on, and this way you can also control just how opaque you want it to be, so you can get more of a wash, or you can have it be fully opaque. Predominantly see pink flecks throughout it, but there's like a really small particle size that almost looks like aqua or green. It's really interesting. It makes it really dimensional on the lid, and I just love this formula. As I said, if you have hooded oily lids, you definitely want to use a regular eyeshadow primer before you put this on, but this does not budge for me. I don't have to worry about it at all day. I don't really experience fallout with this one unless I'm using like a lot of it. Those are my top 10 recommendations for one and done shadows. I'm so excited to hear Nopor's and Smita's top 10 one and done shadows. Thank you for collaborating with me. I'm so curious to see if any of these will overlap, and go watch the videos. They are linked in the description box. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite one and done shadows are, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.